Shalom, shalom. Very exciting. This week we start the new Sefer of Shemot. And we left off last week with the end of the story where Yosef was at the end of his life and he was going to die. And then we start off in Shemot learning that all the tribes had died out from that generation. And then we're told about the story that led to the enslavement of the Jewish nation. Now, there are striking similarities. We're going from the story of Yosef to the story of Moshe, and the similarity between the two of them is really something unbelievable. And the story of Yosef was the one in which led the nation down to Egypt, which was the beginning of their galut, the beginning of their exile. And Shemot is the story of Moshe, which is going to be the beginning of the redemption. Now, let's take a look at the story for a minute to see the similarity that I'm talking about and how the transition leads us from the exile into the redemption. So, Yosef, we know the famous story, he went to his father told him to go check on his brothers and see how they were doing while they were shepherding in what was supposed to be Shechem, ended up to be Dotan, and they saw him from afar and they hated him. Now, the reason why we know that they hated him so much was because he told over their dreams to the brothers, and they said to him in utter disgust, "You are going to be a judge and a ruler over us," and it says they continued to hate him even more. Now, interestingly enough, in our Parsha in Shemot, Moshe also goes to check on what the narrative tells us as his brothers, the nation, and he considered them to be his brothers. And when he goes to check on his brothers, he said he saw them having a fight with one another, and he says to the evil one, "Why are you hitting your brother?" And the reply is, "Who appointed you judge and a ruler over us?" And the language is strikingly similar. Here and there, both of them went to see how the brothers are doing, wanted them to be doing the right thing. And in both cases, they hated the brother, and they hurled accusations of him just trying to be, to pull up some power trip over them, which wasn't the case at all. And in both cases, the case of Yosef, we know he was thrown into the pit, and then he had to be gone from his family for decades. And so too with Moshe. In this story, when he asks them, the evil person replies to him, "What, you gonna kill me like you killed that Egyptian yesterday?" Because when he saw the Egyptian unfairly abusing the Jewish worker, he killed him and buried him in the sand. And then it says he had to flee because he had to be in fear for his life. He knew that was going to, as Paro, we're told later, heard about it and was after Moshe to have his head on a plate for that. So Moshe also had to flee till he was 80 years old. And when he's 80 years old, and we're told in the Parsha this week that God comes to him, we know the famous story. He's watching the sheep. He chases after one of them on the mountain, and he sees the burning bush where God approaches him to tell him that he has to be the savior of the Jewish people, for which he argues for an extended period of time that he is not the person to do. He doesn't want to do this, and don't blame him with his experience what it was. And he felt that he would not be accepted by the nation. He was rejected there, and he's been an outsider even longer now. Why would they accept him as a leader? And he's arguing with God, and until God says to him, "Don't worry, your brother Aaron will be your mouthpiece, and he's on his way to meet you, and when he sees you, he will rejoice in his heart." And all of a sudden, something about that changes Moshe's mode of argument, and he accepts it, and he takes the mission. Why is that? Why is that? So, or used to think that it was because he kept saying he's Arel Svatayim, he's not one to speak, he can't speak. And then once God said, okay, don't worry, your brother will lift that burden for you and he'll be your mouthpiece and you'll tell him what to say, that he's like, okay, good, as long as I don't have to do that. But I think it's something even greater. I think when God told him, your brother is on the way and he's going to rejoice in his heart when he sees you, I think that's what changed his mind. Let's remember that it was the hatred that got the Jewish nation into the bind to have to go down into enslavement in Egypt in the first place. And it was the hatred that made Moshe have to flee. And I think that when Moshe was afraid, because after he accepted the mission, he goes to his father-in-law, and he doesn't tell his father-in-law, hey, listen, Yitro, God came to me, gave me a mission, I got to go do it, I got to leave, I got to go to Mitzrayim and take the people out. That is not what he does. He doesn't tell his father-in-law any of that. He just says, Yitro, I want to go back and check on my people and see if they are still living. It says, Ha'odam Chai, or something like that, if they're still living. So why does he say that? Why does he say if they're still living? God just told him to go and to take him out and to redeem him. And I think what it was for him is that he didn't think that, okay, they must have been utterly destroyed because of all of the enslavement and all the brutal beatings and everything that the Egyptians had put them through, that's what killed him. I think what he was thinking is he saw that the nation was able to flourish through all the difficulties, because it says every time Paro tried to make it harder, they just kept prospering. It wasn't hurting them in terms of numbers and life. So what is it? I think Moshe thought what would be their demise is that the brother was turning on the brother, like he saw when we went out to check on them. That brother was turning on brother, and that one of his own people forced him to flee for his life. And he knew in his wisdom that the nation can withstand horrible, oppressive work and torture, but what will not keep them going, and what will help them to self-destruct, so they turn on one another. So he wanted to go back. He's thinking, oh, well, if God says it's time for them to come out, perhaps they're not like that anymore. Perhaps they're not turning in, but they're bound together. And that's, I think, why when God said, your brother, Aaron, who he has not seen, he's 80 years old, he left when he was about 20, he hasn't seen him in 60 years. This is somebody, and he didn't even grow up with him. He was in the house of Paro, where Aaron was forced to live with the Jews. This brother was going to be happy in his heart to hear that God chose him to be the leader of the Jewish people. Then he said, the people must have changed. Look, my brother's going to seriously be happy, and God knows what's going on in somebody's heart, not what they say. And that he's saying in Aaron's heart, he'll be happy for you. And he thought perhaps this is a really good sign. Maybe the people are changed. Maybe they are now ha'odam chai. Maybe they're living the life that they're supposed to live as brothers who love each other, who come together, who support and uplift one another, like God told Moshe Aaron was going to do for him, and he was going to do for Aaron. And that was something he could get on board for. That was something where he felt was a glimmer of hope. That was something he felt like he wasn't just going to a hopeless place and he can't do anything, because if he goes, he'll just be returning back to the situation which he had to flee from in the first place. And that information from God was enough for him to go, and it was the beginning of redemption. What led them into exile was hatred for one another, and the beginning, the seed of redemption, is this sentence that God tells Moshe, that Aaron will be happy in his heart to see you, and that they will partner like one, helping one another. And so the difficult times we're going through all over the world, let us keep this in mind. We want things to turn around. We want things to get better. We want to go uphill. We have to do that for one another. Be there, be happy for one another, support one another when we need And with that, only good things will be on the horizon. I wish you very much a Shabbat Shalom.